Umar ibn al-Khattab, the Khalifa of the Muslims, once had a dream that someone from his lineage would lead the Muslims, someone very pious and just, someone that had a scar on his face. This person would bring justice to the lands stretching far east and west. Let's start with some context. We need to first understand the environment in which Umar Ibn Abdulaziz arrives to truly appreciate his legacy. The second fitna has just passed. Abdullah ibn Zubayr was killed by Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf in 692. The Ummah has paid a hefty price, but it is finally united again under the lead of Abd al-Malik, who succeeded his father Marwan. This marks the start of the Marwanid branch of the Umayyads, after the Sufyanid branch ended with the death of Muawiyah II. Now, there's a lot of controversy when it comes to the Umayyads. They are generally painted as being corrupt tyrants, and even sexual deviants for some later down the line. However, in Islamic history specifically, one needs to be just and account for the good as much as the bad. And by all classical accounts, Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan was a knowledgeable, pious, and smart leader. We have, for example, written accounts of him leading very extensive prayers. They would at times pray Maghrib until it was time to pray Isha again. During this time, jihad and military expansion picked up again. He ruled until 705, after what his son, Al-Walid ibn Abd al-Malik, became Khalifatul Muslimin. And just like his father, Al-Walid had some good and some bad going for him. On the good side, his reign was marked by the most successful military campaigns and expansions, attacking east and west simultaneously. In 705, Qutayba ibn Muslim was pushing in Transoxiana and conquered many lands and tribes. Musa ibn Nusayr was advancing in North Africa all the way up to current-day Morocco, and Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf appointed his brother-in-law Muhammad ibn Qasim to lead a campaign in Sindh, current-day Pakistan, from 708 to 711. Finally, in 711, Tariq ibn Ziyad was preparing for the conquest of the Visigothic lands. In 715, Al-Walid dies and his brother, Sulayman ibn Abd al-Malik, is the new Khalifa. Sulayman was always praised as being pious. One of the first things he did when becoming Khalifa was re-establish early prayers that were delayed during the time of Al-Walid. Another quality Sulayman had was that he was eager for jihad. He liked going to war for the sake of Allah. One day, on his way to current-day Azerbaijan, he gets sick and dies before getting to his destination. He was asked to assign the next Khalifa before passing away, and the tradition of the Shura, that was the norm during the Khulafa al-Rashidin, where a small council of seniors would sit and pick the most suited person for the job, was lost ever since Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan picked his son as a successor in 680. So the Umayyads were at this point used to transmitting power from father to son. But Sulayman did not want it so. He wanted the most qualified person for the job. And following the Umayyad logic, the next person in line would have been his brother Hisham ibn Abd al-Malik. Sulayman knew that changing this adopted custom would be difficult, and as the wise leader that he was, he wrote the name of his successor in a piece of paper that he sealed, and he ordered that at his death, everyone gave allegiance to the person whose name was written on it. Hisham was obviously not very excited about this idea, but the order was given and he was forced to comply to avoid another civil war. And so one day they opened the letter and find out the name of the new Khalifa, Umar Ibn Abdulaziz, the cousin of Sulayman. It is narrated that both Umar and Hisham were present that day. Hisham stood up visibly annoyed by the news, while Umar stayed sit and could not stand up due to the shock the news had on him. See, contrary to Hisham, Umar did not want to lead. But so was his destiny. Umar ibn al-Khattab himself had seen it in a dream. He saw that someone from his lineage, with a scar on his face, would lead the Muslims and fill the earth with justice. And yes, Umar II was related to Umar ibn al-Khattab from his mother's side, which is another contextual story we need to get through to make sense of all of this. Let's go back in time. Umar ibn al-Khattab is Khalifa between 634 and 644 CE. One night, as he was patrolling the streets of Medina, He overheard a conversation between a daughter and her mother. Both sold milk at the market. The mother asked her daughter to mix the milk with some water. Her daughter replied, "Don't you know that Umar Khalifatul Muslimin forbid it?" To which the mother said, "And where is Umar? He is not here." The daughter then replied, "He may not see us, but Allah sees us." Umar was so touched by the woman's piety that he decided to marry her to his son, Asim. And together they had a daughter, Layla, who married Abdulaziz, the father of Umar. So there we have it. Umar ibn al-Khattab was the maternal great-grandfather of another Umar who would mark the history of Islam up until today. The great scholar Sufyan al-Thawri said that the caliphs were five: Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, and Umar ibn Abdulaziz. This was also reported in Sunan Abi Dawood and by Ibn Kathir in his Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. In it, he quoted the famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that says, "Indeed, Allah will send to this ummah at the turn of each century someone to revive the religion." Ibn Kathir commented on that and wrote that a group from the people of knowledge, including Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, have said that Umar ibn Abdulaziz was the Mujaddid, the reviver of the first century. Others have said that he was one from many Mujaddids of the first century, though his name was still most prominent on that list. Now, let's talk about more practical matters. Umar was born to royalty. Abdulaziz, his father, was the governor of Egypt. During that time, Umar lived a luxurious and lavish lifestyle. He would buy one piece of clothing for 5,000 dirhams. When he walked by, people would know and recognize him just from his perfume. He was a very elegant man. And as was the custom back then for smart young boys, his father sent him to study in Al-Madinah al-Munawwara for knowledge. Most notably, he would have studied under the famous Abu Hurairah. Now, back to the Khilafah. He did not desire the Khilafah, rather it was pushed on him. Once elected, however, he took his responsibilities very seriously. On his first khutbah, he told his people, "O people, there is no other book than the Quran, and no other prophet after Muhammad ﷺ. I will not invent laws, but will only follow the Sunnah. And I am not better than any of you, but I have heavier responsibilities now." And to signal his total and complete respect for the Sharia, he added, "There is no obedience to the creation in disobeying the Creator," which basically signaled that he did not expect obedience if what he asked for was not within the bounds of the Sharia. When getting the news of his Khilafah, he reportedly cried and said, "I am afraid that Allah will ask me about every person in this ummah." He understood that the Khilafah was not about serving himself, rather it was about serving the people. At that point, his mindset had completely shifted. The luxuries that he would allow himself with his own money would now be a thing of the past. He even went to his wife Fatima bint Abdul Malik that had some jewelry inherited from her father and told her, "You will have to choose. You either return this jewelry to the Baytul Mal or I will have to divorce you." She said, "I will choose you over it and over things that are many times its value." And so they returned the piece of jewelry to the Baytul Mal. And we have many more ahadith along the same lines, where his zuhud, his piety and asceticism would shine. For example, he was one day presented with the best of horses. He would have none of it. He ordered that it be returned to Baytul Mal and asked for a normal horse instead. They even asked him to leave his house and go to the palace, like the rest of the Umayyad leaders had done. He refused and left his current house for what would be today a small 2-bedroom apartment. He's even reported to have freed every servant that he owned from their bond. None of them left him, and they all continued to work for him. His new mindset also affected the clothes that he would wear. He could no longer afford to spend thousands of dirhams on clothes, now that he was Khalifa. He went to his tailor and asked for a piece of cloth for a value of 8 dirhams, to which the tailor responded, "Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I remember bringing you pieces of cloth for 5,000 dirhams." Umar replied, That was a time where I was accountable to my own wealth. Today, this wealth belongs to the Baytul Mal. The justice that spread was such that Hassan al-Qassab said, I saw actual wolves shepherding sheep during the Khilafah of Umar. Maslama ibn Abdul Malik, his brother-in-law, said one day, I came to visit him because he was sick. He had stains all over his shirt. So I turned to my sister Fatima, upset, and tell her, do you not wash his clothes? She replied, Wallahi, this is the only shirt he owns. His piety and the respect he had for the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ was also something to behold. Zayd ibn Aslam said, on authority of Anas ibn Malik, I have not prayed behind anyone a prayer that resembles the prayer of the Messenger, like the one from this young man. Umar was not only strict with himself and his own family, but even with the extended family of the Umayyads. He cut them off completely until one day they gathered in front of his house. Wahib ibn al-Ward reported that Banu Marwan, meaning the Umayyads, gathered at the door of Umar ibn Abdulaziz and told his son Abdul Malik the following words. Tell your father that the caliphs that preceded him all gave us money and knew our position, but he cut us off completely. Abdul Malik went then to his father and informed him of their request. He came back with a response from Umar, which was the verse 13 from Surah Az-Zumar. Umar ibn Abdulaziz had a unique characteristic. He used to sit down with the people of knowledge all the time. They would come to teach him, but instead, they would be the ones learning from him. In fact, Umar was a strong and reliable narrator of hadith. At the time, the ahadith, that is, the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ, were communicated exclusively orally. For this reason, Umar ordained Imam al-Zuhri to collect and compile them in written format. The first complete work will come as the Muwatta of Imam Malik, but this is where it began. And actually, several hadith scholars said that for every book of hadith that is compiled today, the reward will go to Umar II and Imam al-Zuhri. One day, as he was discussing with scholars in his court, he heard of a specific hadith that moved him to tears. This hadith is narrated in Sunan at-Tirmidhi and goes like this. The poor people from the Muslims will be the first to enter Jannah by half a day. When he heard this hadith, Umar wanted to know more about these people. They told him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, these are the people that no one cares about. No one opens the door for them. No one gives their daughter to them. And they wear very simple clothing. Upon hearing this, Umar literally started to cry. I'm afraid I will not be from them, he said. The people look up to me. Doors are opened to me. Daughters of kings are given to me, he added, referring to his wife Fatima bint Abdul Malik. So, as we mentioned last time, Umar, at the time of his Khilafah, had a single piece of clothing. One day, he arrived late at the Friday prayer. They asked him, Ya Amir al-Muslimin, why is it that you are late today? He answered, I only have this pair of clothing, and I was waiting for them to dry up. At this point, they advised him to get at least another pair for the Friday prayer and for the Eid, which he ended up doing to respect the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ of wearing nice clothes for those two occasions. Umar ibn Abdulaziz was forced by his own people to take a salary, which, by the way, he insisted on returning at his death. He did not even have enough silver for his children's clothes for Eid. His wife asked him to go to Baytul Mal, that is the bank of the Muslims, and ask for a loan. And Umar had put in charge some very pious people that were not afraid to stand up to the leader if what he asked for was not legislated. So when he asked for a loan, in return, they wanted a guarantee that he would pay them back. And since he had no convincing answer, they refused to grant the loan. Because Umar ibn Abdulaziz had gained the pleasure of Allah, that caused him to be loved by the people up until today. we still read and talk about him 1300 years later. And we have to understand that this is not for no reason. During his time, the Ummah was flourishing with great victories. There was no corruption, no oppression. The masses gained economic prosperity. Humayd ibn Zanjawi, in his Kitab al-Amwal, wrote that people were walking around with money of zakat, the mandatory charity that every Muslim is bound to give every year. But no one was there to take it. Abu Ubaid Qasim ibn Salam mentioned in his book that is also named Kitab al-Amwal, Umar wrote to Abdul Hamid ibn Abdul Rahman, who was in charge of Baytul Mal, the bank of the Muslims, to spend on the needy. And he wrote back that they already gave to the needy and still have some money left. Umar then asked him to take some more money and use it to equip the army. He replied the same thing. The army is equipped and we still have more money left over. Then Umar asked him to give to those who want to get married. Again, same reply. There was still money left. Finally, Umar asked him to give some money to the Jews and Christians that lived in that land. So we talked about the piety of Umar Ibn Abdulaziz and his asceticism, but he was also a very good diplomat. He knew how to talk to people and how to react to difficult situations. For example, at his time, a group from the Khawarij from Khorasan was calling for takfir on the Umayyads. And for those unfamiliar with the term takfir, this basically means excommunicating someone from the religion. The Khawarij at that time, which is a sect of the Muslims, are known for being very prompt to do takfir on Muslim leaders for their unpious behavior. When Umar heard about them, instead of sending an army out to Khorasan, he sent them a letter. In the letter, he said, "Come here, you present your arguments and evidence, and if you are right, I will follow you. I will present mine, and if I am right, you will follow me." The man from Khorasan took 2 talented debaters with him, and he asked them to debate Umar and trick him with sophistry. They went and asked him, "Why don't you send the curse of Allah upon the disbelievers of Umayyad?" The 2 Khorasan debaters obviously could not say outright that Umar himself was a kafir, a disbeliever. But Umar, being part of the Umayyad family, knew that this was implied. He asked them in return, "Pharaoh, Fir'aun, is a clear-cut kafir. When is the last time you sent curse on him?" He added, "Whoever testifies that there is no other God than Allah, and that Muhammad is his last prophet, and whoever establishes the salat, believes in the pillars of Islam, they are Muslim, unless they commit clear act of disbelief." An example of such act would be leaving off the salat. As we all know, man taraka salat faqad kafar. Whoever leaves the salat has disbelieved. So he answered all questions with arguments from the Quran and the Sunnah, the prophetic tradition. One of the 2 debaters realized he was in the wrong and asked for forgiveness. The other did not and went back to Khorasan.